Good afternoon. My name is Jeffrey Ritter. The European Convention on the Protection of Individuals with regard to the automatic processing of data was finalized and became effective in 1985. Today I'm wearing cufflinks that mark the beginning of my work in personal information in 1982. Yet this is the first time that I've talked publicly about privacy as an issue. See, as I grow older, I get more impatient with our inability to bring stability to the issues of personal information. And so this afternoon, in the time that I have, I want to make a modest but perhaps provocative proposition, leveraging some ideas that are going to be in a book that will come out later this year that I've been working on for the last 2 years. My suggestion is this: privacy is not moral, philosophical, or political. It is merely a label being attached to something we have never witnessed as a global society, the emergence and formation of a marketplace in which personal information is a new kind of property. That's a concept that, well, to present it, I actually want to step away from anything digital. Every transaction is a barter. One party has something the other party wants, and vice versa. But with computing, what we've seen emerge is a new kind of property that is inherent in every barter transaction, and that is the data. I buy and sell at the grocery store, but I use my debit card. Now data is part of the barter. And this economy of personal information is now present. Each of us has become a manufacturer of data merely by our existence. And so what I think is the fundamental failure at a global level with our discussions of privacy is that we're simply not looking at this as an asset and as a commercial transaction. Dynamic, volatile, voluminous, but ultimately very simple to understand. For a barter to be successful, there are 3 things that have to exist. There has to be an asset, and each party must achieve an affirmative decision to trust. The buyer never acquires an asset if they do not trust that it will be, in fact, successful in doing the work for which it's being acquired. But another aspect of the buyer's trust decision is that the buyer's consideration, be it money or data, will be used as it is intended. Now, we don't really care when it's cash, but when it's personal data, we do have a concern. How can we trust the party that's collecting the information, that's filtering the information, that's processing the information to perform as intended? So for the last several years, I've considered this the one grand challenge that hasn't been addressed. How do we build digital trust? 3 principles that I can share with you and apply to privacy as an introduction to how simple and how hard the answer is. First, trust is not an emotion. It's actually the outcome of very deliberative decision that each of us makes in determining whether to use and rely upon what we are deciding to trust. It could be a teacher, it could be a minister, it could be a hammer at Home Depot, a soup spoon that you're lending me that's a little crusty around the edges, or it could be digital information. But trust is actually the output of a calculus in which we're evaluating, does this asset meet our requirements? And if I'm giving you my personal information as a manufacturer, the question I ask is, can I trust you to use this information as I expect? And that's the flaw. What we see in all of the collection of information that occurs in the everyday occurrences of how we go through life is that the information is being used in ways that are not disclosed and in ways for which we are not receiving fair value. changes the dialogue if we can think about it in a calculation of trust. So how do I make that trust decision? Well, I take the target that I'm evaluating. Actually, you can call it that, a trust decision target. And I compare it to a set of criteria. Those criteria are rules. And so the second principle to share is that trust is a rules-based decision. Our problem in privacy as a marketplace for personal information is that we simply have struggled because of the size, the complexity of the community, of the society, of the data, and the diversity of solutions. We've struggled to be able to identify the rules with which we can evaluate whether we can trust the recipient of our personal information. Once those rules can be identified and expressed, the calculus of trust is remarkably mathematical. You've got to add it up. If the pluses and minuses do not create a positive outcome, that you have confidence the recipient of data will behave as intended, then to give them the data is to guess as to what they will do with it, as opposed to have confidence in the outcome. That brings me to the third principle. And this is the one which I think can transform the way we think of this. Archimedes came up with this in his bathtub, and I can actually tell you, I was standing in the shower when I stood out, dripping naked, and shouted down the stairs to my wife, I figured this out. It's called the velocity principle, and simply stated as this: the velocity of information is proportional to the transparency of its governance. Information moves faster when we understand how it has been governed, how was it created, and were all of the rules applied to the information that we expect to be applied. A dictator in a non-democratic nation gains power because he withholds the transparency of the information. In privacy, as we describe it as a marketplace, the problem is that we're providing an asset of value, the personal information we manufacture through our daily affairs, without understanding how it will be governed. Information moves faster when we have the transparency of its governance understood. Now, one of the challenges we have in discussing the economics of privacy and the politics of privacy and the rather horrifying stories we've heard over the last 2 days of some misuses of personal information is that businesses struggle to make the economic business case for offering better control of personal information. The reality is businesses make business decisions faster when they too can understand the governance with which information has been maintained. And we can connect the value of personal information to the velocity with which companies make decisions. We transform the business justification for making privacy an asset of a business rather than a liability. Now, to achieve those three principles, that trust is not an emotion, that it's a rules-based decision, and that information gains velocity with the transparency of its governance, I've built some things we don't have time to talk about. The unified rules model, a unified information model, and this one really cool thing, which one of our earlier speakers said should best be referenced to Tony Stark in Iron Man, as this three-dimensional vision of any system that allows us to understand within that system how it's being governed, called the trust prism. But I'll offer this. If you give me your name, and you can find me on the net at jeffrey@jeffreyritter.com, for merely giving me the attention you've given me the last 10 minutes, I'll make sure you get one of the first free copies of the book later this year. So you can help me and the next generation figure out a velocity to solving this privacy issue, so we can have a stable marketplace on a global basis for the information each of us manufactures, and that we get properly compensated for its value. Thank you.